First of all, let me welcome everybody that's here, especially those that may be visiting for the first time. You know, some of the people you're sitting next to have been here, oh my gosh, hundreds, thousands of times. But for some of you, this has been your first or second. And so I want to welcome you to a very, very, very different church, a church where what lies at the very core of who we are is our relationships to each other, and then as we try to seek to have relationship with the world without. Welcome. For my sermon this morning, I'm going to start with a couple of stories. The first is from a book that I read recently called The Madness of Crowds. You know, when I was recovering from my aorta thing, I needed something to read, and the first thing that Vivian gave me was a book by Louise Penny, a Canadian author. And I ended up reading all the ones that she had written up to that point to get me through the 8-week rehab. But then later on, I got tired of her books because they started to take a really dark turn. You know, these are murder mysteries set in Canada. You know, and at the heart of the murder in her plots is that there's something deeply wrong that is broken, and that deeply wrong thing can be decades old and really, really, really horrible. And it was about the time when we were going through a couple of difficult political campaigns, and I'd had about all the horrible I could take for a while. So I put it aside and decided not to read it again. And then somebody read the newest one and told my wife about it, and she said, "Oh, this is the best one she's written," and blah, 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 and you should get it. So she did, and then she hit starry-eyed, she gave it to me. And if those of you that know me know that I am the slowest reader in the world. I read everything as though it's a play, as if it's a screenplay for a movie or something. I'm looking for the character development. What character could I play? Blah, blah, blah. So I read this book in 2 days. It's a page turner. So I highly recommend it to any of you. But what made it especially extraordinary for me was that she wrote it during the COVID isolation period. And her editors kept saying, "Well, you're going to have to talk about the COVID-19 in this book. I mean, you always write a contemporary book." And she said, I can't, no, I'm not going to do it. But after the first draft, about halfway through it, she realized she had to. But here was the thing that she did. She didn't want to do the complications of being in the midst of it, so she devised to write it the Christmas after it ended. What she described was that the world had got vaccinated. We had opened the patents, we encouraged multiple generations of vaccines. We started spreading it across the planet. We reached that moment where the COVID no longer had a place to take hold. And the joy of literally being free again, not the slapdash, you know, this country's open, this one's not, this border you can cross, that one you can't, this restaurant's open, that one's not, this one has staff, the other, but truly open again. But she also mentioned that in the book, that even though that sense of ease of being together was back, learning how to be together was still difficult. Learning how to love, learning how to kiss, learning how to hug, shake hands, just to be in each other's presence was a learning experience that was very, very difficult. But of course, it's still a murder mystery, so it was that part was fun too, and it's really good. But the name of the book is called The Madness of Crowds. Timing. She also talked about how the COVID had not created the fractures in our society. It revealed them. So, with that as a backdrop, I'm also addicted to a thing called On Being. And I'm going to share mostly for all of us that have known what it's like to be here when we're in full force, but also for those who are here for the first time. The On Being Project is a podcast that features, among other things, an Irish poet and theologian named Padraig Ó Tuama. Brilliant brilliant theologian and poet. And he told a story this week, yesterday morning actually, he told the story of after the troubles in Ireland, and after the troubles between Northern Ireland, England, and the Republic of Ireland. He was called upon to create an interfaith gathering in Belfast as a way of, well, because if you know the troubles, it was about Catholics versus Protestants, and so all the other people that were there that were Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, they were kind of thrown to the wolves. But so this was an interfaith gathering, and this is what he decided to do in his brilliance. He decided every Thursday before the meeting, he would get up at 5 in the morning and start baking bread. Loaves of Irish brown bread. And then he would wrap them so that they were still warm when he got to the meeting. And he also, this is what he says, and I brought the good butter. Now, I don't know what that could possibly mean in Ireland. To me, it's like a good cookie. What? Because in Ireland, the butter, they're known for butter. And if you try to buy it here in the United States, you pay a premium. And once you've tasted it, it's like going from $2 chuck to, Chateau Neuf du Pont. So I don't eat Irish butter. It's very expensive. But he brought the good butter. And when he would get there, he would open the loaves, and the aroma would then fill the hall where they were meeting. And they had actually what amounted to become a communion service every morning to start the meeting. Because there would be sometimes a disagreement, contention, different ideas, because he had Muslim imams, he had Buddhist monks, he had anybody that cared about interfaith in Belfast was invited, the clergy. So I started thinking back to my Catholic days as a Catholic schoolboy and then an altar boy. The magic of being an altar boy was not the Mass, not the grouchy priests who were upset at having to say Mass every morning at 7 o'clock. It was, the real benefit was going back into the cafeteria when everybody else had gone to class, and I had that 15 minutes, and the smell of Shipley's donuts warming in the oven in the cafeteria. I swear to God, you could, and some of the kids had had them for breakfast, but they were still there. And I think they ordered like 12 dozen or whatever it was, and I could have as many as I could afford. I can't even begin to tell you that of all my Catholic upbringing, all the catechism and the non-Bible reading and all the rest of it, the thing I remember and cherish the most, when they say smells and bells, is the smell of warm donuts. It made it a holy place. But for all of you, and especially for those of you that are trying to find your way into the life of the church, there's an ingredient missing right now because of COVID. I'm sure you noticed the alternate pews, etc. Normally on a Sunday morning, we lead with coffee and homemade treats in the community room. Now, I had a dream last night that we had made a deal with Shipley's. And a gross of, not gross, but a gross of donuts would be warming in our ovens every Sunday morning. So the first thing that you encountered when you get, besides the smell of coffee, which is good enough for me, but donuts. The brown bread of Catholicism. And you don't need butter. In fact, I recommend not doing butter. But in that half hour when we're greeting each other over coffee and the homemade treats, etc., is the moment where we actually start the sacred nature of being together in church. Where we check in with each other. Check the body language of each other. How are you doing? How have you been? What's new in your life? Welcome home from those that have been to Timbuktu and back, or those. Tell me how your life is. The key in the Unitarian Universalist Church is to listen deeply enough to be changed by what you hear from each other. We're not here to promote dogma or creeds or theological absolutes. And I think that's one of the things that really disappointed me about being of another faith. People could come to church in those old days simply to sort of dot their I's and cross their T's. They came for, communion and confession. It really wasn't for the relationships, because there were hundreds of people, thousands of people belonged to that parish. You couldn't possibly know everybody. But there's magic in coming to this sacred place on Sunday mornings normally. And so for those of you that are here for the first or the second or the third time, be patient. It's going to take longer for you to witness the absolute stunning love and integrity and generosity of this church, because we don't know when we're going to be able to go back to that yet. But I will tell you, that's the best first half hour of church I have ever spent. Without a donut in my mouth. And so I invite you to be patient as we gnaw our way back to our normalcy. But I titled today's sermon, The Future of Hope. And I wrote something that I want to share, because it'll be easier for me to read something than, because actually thinking about John and Barbara leaving got me emotional too. So I wrote this, and I just want to share this. It's about how hope and optimism are not the same thing, even though we tend to sort of smoosh them together or use them interchangeably, and they're not the same. Hope is defined as wanting something to happen or wishing something to be true. To cherish or desire with anticipation. Whereas optimism is confidence about the future, or that there will be a successful outcome of something. I call it divine intervention. That sometimes it is reflected in the belief that God must ultimately prevail over evil in the universe, or in our terms, good over bad. To which I would say, I'm hopeful that all the remaining unvaccinated adults and our children will embrace medical science and get the damn vaccine. But I'm not optimistic. There's no sense in me waiting for some miracle to happen, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes over, New Delhi or Madagascar or Rio de Janeiro or New York. And everybody, oh my goodness, let's go get the vaccine. That's not going to happen. For me, optimism is a state of wishful thinking, of expectation that something might happen. But hope is a verb. Hope is a verb that says if you really want something, you've got to be in the trenches making it happen. You've got to be one of the people trying to make the world better, to actually create the beloved community that you want. I wrote a few other lines about that. I'm hopeful that we will welcome immigrants to integrate our culture without being required to assimilate, meaning not having to abandon their language or their customs or their food or their clothes or the color of their skin. Stop denying women agency over their reproductive lives, that they will be able to determine if, when, and with whom they will create family. And I'm hopeful that we'll cease marginalizing the LGBTQ among us, and that we will stop politicizing our values. I'm hopeful for all of those, but I am not optimistic, not without us being engaged in that work. And one of the things that came out in that On Being project is it's really hard to create a movement if you don't know the people who are in it with you. That's why that half hour before church may well be the most important half hour every week for all of us. We will get it back. We will get it back. So the question becomes, have we seen enough, experienced enough to understand the enormity of the challenges that we face? Our biases and our bigotry and our privilege will take a long time to understand and to recover from, if we ever do. But I'm reminded that every generation, including my own, has faced problems that seem insurmountable. In the last 100 years alone, we have survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression. We've overcome the polio epidemic, the AIDS crisis, and numerous recessions. We've overcome many cancers and launched humankind into space. Where were you in August of 1969? But as we transition, we need to remember that each time we reached out in common humanity and made allies of partners across vast differences of culture, differences of religion, differences of language, to overcome the dangers that were before us. And this time has come again. And COVID-19 is the gift that makes us see this, because we will not eradicate this from the planet until we eradicate it from the planet. This is not about Hot Springs Village or Arkansas or any place else. This is about our planet. We've done it before and we can do it again. So as we transition to Thanksgiving and the religious celebrations of December, it's my hope that we once more find the generosity of reaching out beyond the narrow confines of custom, color, language, and religion. That we'll forge new partnerships, maybe with some of you that are sitting here now in your first time, where we're going to just square our shoulders and lift our gaze. There's a hymn in our tradition with the phrase, "When our heart is in a holy place." We'll probably sing it in the next few weeks, because I thought of that hymn again when I was writing this. It describes the holy place as being full of love and amazing grace. And every time I hear that line, I think of this. I think of this that we do, that we create here at 403 Barcelona. It's a place where we tell our stories, listen lovingly, and trust the wisdom in each of us. A place where the God of our hearts stirs within. And it's not a place of fear and mistrust, in spite of the elbow bumps now and the mask. And it's not a place of exclusion. Rather, it is a sacred space of inclusion where we welcome each other. And so as I was writing this on Friday, I thought, or was it Wednesday, I forget, but anyway, I thought of a poem by Mara Markova, part of which says, "I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me up, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, or a promise. This is the time to face what has been hard and hurting, and to rise again to what is beautiful and life-giving. To meet this new moment in our church life with our highest humanity, and to grow our love together again. How lucky we are to have this faith, to have each other. So may we continue to be the community that chooses fearlessness over fear, and the community who has welcomed everyone in need of affirmation and care. Let me say one more time. You are welcomed. It will get better. We will get to know you better, and you will get to know us too. And then once again, the magic will continue. Blessed be.